Hi there. So today I hope to describe to you what is Spring Boot. Hopefully I'll do it in a pretty short time. I'm going to talk about the very basics, and from there on we'll move in this series hopefully to more complex stuff, starting with the very theory in this first videos, and from there on we'll move into creating an app in IntelliJ. Hopefully we'll make some cool applications together. Well, Spring Boot is basically a layer on top of Java. Okay, we have Java with a capital J. Java is a great language. I mean, it's been here for a very long time, really liked by a lot of very big organizations because it's reliable. I mean, like I said earlier, it's been here for a long time. I mean, Spring Boot is basically a framework that was built on top of Java. Why? It was built to basically make your developing experience a lot easier. It provides a lot of tools, a lot of cool stuff that you can use to work with the cloud, work with security, things that you might not be the biggest pro in security or cloud computing, etc. But it might give you a lot of these tools that make it a lot more accessible. Okay, so basically Spring, like I said, it's a framework, makes everything easier. And I think this diagram over here really describes what an application is all about. It's obviously a lot more complex than that. It might differ a little bit, but overall, that's like the concept that a web application is all about. Okay, let's just write down a web application. Okay, so this is basically the way I would look in a particular web application. It would make it easier for you to understand before we'll go into the actual programming and into what Spring is all about and use Java, etc. So first of all, we have the client. Okay, the client is basically like the front. Let's say you have a bank. Okay, and the bank has some sort of login with email and some sort of password. Okay, let's go with pass. This is the bank. Okay, cool. That's like the front of the page, right? It's like the interface. Let's say the bank has some cool logo over here. Well, that's definitely not a cool logo, but let's say that's the logo. Okay, so pretty cool, right? We have the front, and this is a horrible design over here, but hopefully your application has a nicer design. And in here, we have all the front, all the static stuff, right? The things that are not changing. The logo is there, the input here is there, the password input over here is there. It's not gonna go anywhere. It's like HTML, if you ever heard of it. But we'll get into that. We'll get into client stuff later. But how, right now I want to click on send, right? To log in into my account. Okay, so what's going on over here? I need to click send, and then in the back, what we need to do is we need to figure out, is this user a legitimate user? Anyways, we're trying to authorize or authenticate this particular user that is trying to log in. How are we doing that? Okay, let's get rid of our wonderful application that we designed over here. So basically, what the client does, the front, right? It's going using an HTTP or HTTPS request. It's going to the controller. We're going to talk about the controller a lot in this series. Basically, the controller is providing all the addresses or endpoints. Okay, endpoints that provide a certain data. Okay, provide resources according to the user's needs. Okay, like let's say www.bank/ I don't know, let's say transactions. Okay, transactions, right? Maybe we want only the users, all of the users' transactions that were made. Okay, or the transactions that were made last month. Okay, so the controller is basically providing the links to certain data according to the client's needs. Okay, you understand what I'm talking about when we get into programming, but the controller is basically how the client is communicating or addressing certain data that it wants to get. The controller, I mean, yes, we have a link, but this link is worthless unless we have some sort of logic, the programming part, that actually is maybe filtering the data accordingly, or doing some calculations, or I don't know, like using some extra external APIs. This is where we have most of the logic situation going on. Okay, so then we have the model. The model is basically, some people call it the entities or entity. It's basically the different objects we're using to describe the data that is saved in the database. Now, in a bank, let's say application, in a bank app, we might have users, we might have an account. Okay, we might have all kinds of entities or models or objects that are used to describe a bank application. You have users. Let's say we have a user model or a user object. A user has an ID. A user has an age, and so on and so forth. Then the user has an account, and the account basically has the balance that the user has. So again, the sky is the limit in terms of how you can describe all these different objects, so that later we can provide the client, the end application, or the front, with a lot of data according to its needs. Now, like I said, the model is just there to describe the different objects so that the data will be transferred in a nice and organized way. Very basic. You'll see it, we'll talk about it, we'll develop it. And then we have repository. Repository is very easy, and especially with using Spring Boot, you'll have all the tools to create a repository for each model. Okay, each model has a repository, because the repository is basically allowing us to work with the database. It's allowing us to save new models or new users, new objects in the database in a particular form. And it's allowing us to get the necessary objects that we're looking for to get to the client, right? So it's allowing us basically to communicate with the database. It's allowing us to save, it's allowing us to get, it's allowing us to delete, update certain models or certain objects. Okay, let's say I want to get a particular user. Let's give it even a better example. Okay, let's say again we're in our bank application. Okay, that's not what I was looking for. Okay, so we have this bank application, and we have this credentials that we need to provide. And once we provide them, there's like a little send. Oh, okay, I'm not exactly the best designer. I agree to that. We have the send button over here. Okay, let's just color it a little bit nicer. Okay, so we provide all the credentials. It's our applications. We're not here to fool anyone. I mean, we're not using anybody else's. We're not trying to log into somebody else's account. It's our account, and we provide the correct credentials. But it's not enough for the client. The client doesn't know how to deal with it. Okay, all of this information, all of this data about credentials of users, etc., it's here in the database. Okay, so first of all, the client has to get it from the controller. In the controller, there's probably a certain endpoint that provides login information. Okay, login, you're provided with an input of credentials, of username and password, and it's basically supposed to then go to the service. Okay, in the service, we're using certain logic to go through the different usernames and passwords and see whether we have a match, and logically to check whether both of these are correct. Maybe if only the email is correct but the password is not correct, maybe we should give the end user a different message back. So this is like the different logic stuff that we're working on in the service. And from the service is using the different models to figure out whether this client is the correct client and whether can we give him a permission to log in. Then we go to the repository. In the repository, we're checking in the user table, okay, in the database, we're checking whether there is an actual client like that, a user with a username like that and with a password like that. And if it's correct, if we get an approval from the database, or aka the repository, because we communicate with the database using the repository tools that provided by Spring, that are provided by Spring, and then the approval, we go back to the service. In the service, it appears to be correct. I mean, it appears to be the correct credentials. We go back to the controller, and through the controller, using an HTTP request, HTTP ASK request, we're giving the client a response. And in this case, it's a quote unquote positive response, or an okay. All right, we'll get into HTTP later in terms of the protocol. Then you can enter the page. Okay, it's probably going to redirect you into a home page where you have all kinds of information about transactions, all kinds of maybe messages you're getting from your private banking, whatever that is. It doesn't really matter, but all of this data is coming from here. Okay, this is a very basic way to describe it. Okay, in real life, it's incredibly complex. I mean, to make an application efficient, you want to break this process down into very small pieces. We'll talk about it hopefully later, but that's like a more complex. Right now, I want you to understand all these basic things, because once you do, you can build pretty much anything. Okay. So I hope you liked my introduction to this series and to Spring Boot in general. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy for you to write down in the comments. If you like the video, please like it. If you're interested in more videos like that and more videos about Spring Boot, about programming in general, go ahead and give me a follow-up. Just subscribe to my channel. In any case, have a lovely day.